So in modern times, there's this incredible database called the Child Language Data Exchange System, CHILDS for short. And what this contains are vast amounts of video and audio recordings of spontaneous speech samples, natural child language interactions, along very often with transcriptions and some structural, often linguistic, but maybe also some conceptual, some sort of non-linguistic context information about what's going on. And this is extremely valuable resource to the language acquisition community. It's really, better than than what we can usually get from diary studies, because it's really recording a lot of information and also putting it in a form that's easily searchable. So if you have a particular question and you want to investigate all of these different child language interactions that are transcribed and recorded, you can do that using the child's database system. And so the difficulty, of course, and the reason why it's such a heroic effort, is that when you have these samples, these videos or audios sometimes only, you have to transcribe the recorded speech, right? And that's really, 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 really hard. Like I speak particularly quickly, but we often speak pretty quickly. But if you have to write down like literally everything that is said, right? It's really hard. Just try to do this, right? Like try to write down exactly what I'm saying right this moment, right? And it'll take you a while to type it all out, to get every little nuance, to get every little mistake, right? Because of course we're very interested not just in the things they say correctly, not the gist of what they're saying, but exactly what they're saying. So it may in fact take between 5 and 20 hours to faithfully transcribe just 1 hour of child speech interactions, right? Again, there are lots of reasons for this. It's just hard you can't write as fast as you talk normally, but conversational speech often doesn't use complete sentences. Child pronunciation is often not adult-like. And of course, again, it's the non-adult-like parts that are usually what researchers are interested in. In fact, if you go to this particular website right here, you can see an example, a really nice example of the different sorts of errors, right? And the different kinds of non-complete sentences that we use in conversation all the time. So for example, here's just a little teeny excerpt, right? Where you're looking, no, get down. What do you want to do, Laura? You want to go night-night? Right? These are, we understand this is perfectly normal interaction, but this is the only one that's really a complete sentence. Maybe get down if you think about it, right? But there's, wanna, short for want to, right? Like there's a lot that goes into recording that extremely short interaction, right? And just talking about, again, how powerful this kind of resource is, Sedovy sums it up really nicely by saying that Childis is a game changer for the field of language development, right? Because it allows researchers with limited resources, right, to actually test hypotheses using an extremely rich data set, right? You don't have to go and collect all of the data, right? The data's already there. You just have a question that you want to answer. How often does this occur? Or when does that occur? Or if children say this, do adults say that? What's the progression of learning this particular word or this particular structure, right? You can just look for that in the child's database without having to gather that data yourself. So it allows for comparison across many different languages. There are many different languages that are represented in child's. It makes it possible then to do that cross-linguistic research and look for universal patterns in language development. And because the transcripts also include language by the adults that children are interacting with, right? The input that children are getting. It also allows researchers to test detailed quantitative predictions about the relationships between a child's input and her language production, right? Like how is she using that input? What kind of input is she getting? When a child gets this kind of input, what kind of output do they produce, right? How long does it take them to produce a certain type of output? Now, usually, because again, these are samples of naturally occurring speech, we often can use the child's database to find out the nature of language that children produce, also the types of things they tend to hear. But these are samples typically, unlike a diary study that sort of might record everything like Deb Roy's work, where he videotaped like literally everything, which most people don't do, right? What we get from the child's database is a sample, right? Whatever 1 hour session that was recorded maybe from that child's day, right? Now, ideally, the sample is representative of everything the child says, but obviously that's hard to be sure of, right? So because of this, because we really are looking at samples of child speech from childhood, right? It's hard to make claims that children, for example, don't use or don't know a particular structure, a particular word, based on its absence in these kinds of spontaneous speech samples, right? It could be that they simply didn't say that word or that structure when they were being recorded, right? So at this very moment, if I'm sort of going off the material on this slide, there's nothing on this slide about a hippogriff, right? But if you are a Harry Potter fan or a Dungeons and Dragons fan, you might, or if you knew that I was, you might think that, oh, she probably knows that word, right? But I wouldn't have said it before this very point. So if you were just listening to my naturalistic speech about the content of this slide, you'd have no way to know that I actually knew the word hippogriff, right? It's the same problem when we're trying to figure out, right, what children know or don't know from these samples. We can get a sense of, very often again, what their input might be, the sorts of things they might say at different times. But it's hard to know that just because a child didn't say hippogriff, right, that they don't know hippogriff, or maybe even maybe simpler words like penguin or something like that. Just because they don't say it in naturalistic speech doesn't mean they don't know it, right? So you have to be careful about how you use these kinds of naturalistic data, but they're, again, an incredible resource for the language acquisition community.